the challenge that we are seeing ahead of us now to change transportation systems to electromobility is much bigger than the challenge of sending a man to the moon.
Brian here. How you doing, bud?
I'm fine, thanks.
Awesome.
How are you?
I'm doing well. This is Manny.
Yeah, hi. Happy New Year.
Hi, the same to you.
Thanks.
So what time is it by you right now, Mats?
It's 7 p.m.
7 p.m. Okay.
So what time is it at your place?
It is just hitting noon, just a couple minutes before noon. So yeah, that's about 7 hours ahead. So how has Friday been? Has it been a good day? I want to know what to expect in the next 7 hours.
Yeah, it's been a great day. I've been in a lot of meetings, had a good conversations, recorded one podcast earlier as well.
Oh wow! So you're super busy, and isn't that normal work time for you, right? So you're giving us your personal time.
Yes, but
all right.
I work around the clock almost. At least I often have meetings in the evening and as well, so it's not a problem.
Awesome. Well, Mats, welcome to the Business Line Podcast. We're super excited to have you here. Can't wait to talk about everything that you're that's keeping you busy, because it's an important topic for the entire world, not just the UK, but it sounds like the UK is, for better or for worse, making some moves and shaking when it comes to environmental, climate issues and how it, how to dictate that as far as how we get around in the world.
Yes.
So. Share with us a little bit about yourself before we get into the deep topics. Tell us about yourself, how you got to where you are today, kind of maybe the roots of Mats Larsson.
Yes, thank you. I've been working as a consultant with business development, business strategy, change management for 30 years. And I started to think about the amount of resources that would be needed in order to change transport systems to renewable fuels. I started to do that almost 20 years ago. And I wrote my first book on this topic called Global Energy Transformation in 2009. It was published by Palgrave. And I then wrote the second, The Business of Global Energy Transformation, in 2012. And I've continued to explore the amount of resources needed, the amount of electricity needed, and the grid capacity and so on that will be needed to drive all cars and trucks and buses on electricity. And a lot more power will be needed than most people expect. And in the US, according to Elon Musk, in an interview at the conference CodeCon 2021, he says that in the US you'll need to double power production in order to facilitate the complete change to electric vehicle. And that means that you'll need in the country in total 4,000 terawatt hours, which is the power generated by 360 nuclear reactors or 1.2 million wind turbines. So that's really a lot. And he also said that there's a need to invest in all parts of power grids because a lot more electricity will be needed to transmit and distribute to users than is the case at present. So that has really I started 18 years ago, and not much has happened over the first of 15 of those years. But since 2020 or 2021, more people have taken an interest, and more companies and experts have expressed their views on this, but it's still a really novel area to get into, and many more people need to engage with these very important issues.
Yeah. So what got you 18 years ago to the point where you were going to start pursuing this? Was it just something that was an interest or something early in your career that kind of led that direction, or?
No, actually, I read a book by an American author called by the name of Richard Heinberg about the imminent, as he expected, imminent peak in oil production, which I realized that if oil production was going to peak, which it will at some point, even though it hasn't, according to the forecasts made then around 2001, 2002. But I realized that if oil production is going to peak, we will need new transportation systems that are fueled by other fuels than oil. And I started to take an interest in this because of that. And since then, the fear of the peak in oil production has changed to the view that we need to change transportation systems for because of environmental reasons. And so, but the activities and the investments that will be needed in order to achieve the change are the same, regardless of the cause of the change. So it turned out I've investigated an area that's really gained in interest and that's really important at present.
In your opinion, because you've obviously done years and years of work, much more than myself, much more than Manny, we're very much laymen, but we pay attention to headlines and water cooler conversation and family conversation and friends and business, right? In your opinion, maybe I'm jumping too far ahead here, but what do you think is going to be the best way to generate the power needed? Like, there's going to need to be infrastructure to support the power that runs everywhere, right? We talked about that. If we're going to move to 100% electric, and that's just in automobiles or mobility type of things, maybe not even counting industry, maybe because industry has to support the power generation, right? And so yes. you mentioned two of the things in your U.S. Example, nuclear and wind, right? But there's lots of others. In your opinion, what's the best option right now? Well,
I believe there's a number of different generation technologies will be needed because I'm not an expert in this myself, but I've discussed it with professors in the area and practitioners at utilities, and I believe that there is definitely a need for a base load at all times that secures the access to a base load of electricity, and that can't be supplied by intermittent generation technologies like wind or solar. And there is a need for a base load in the form of large, heavy turbines because they provide also the balancing of the grid. So they maintain the frequency of the power grids in a way that, for example, if you store wind power or solar power in batteries, the batteries wouldn't supply the base load and the balancing in the way that's needed for the frequency to remain stable. So some form of base load, and that the most obvious source of base load would be nuclear power or hydroelectric. But as we all know, there's a limited resource for hydroelectric power, and many of the places where you can generate hydroelectric power have already been used. So whether we like it or not, it seems as if we need nuclear power as base load to a certain extent. And the more wind and solar we use, the more base load we need, and we also need balancing power to balance out the periods during the week or day when solar and wind doesn't do not generate enough. So I think we definitely need wind and solar, and we need to expand those. And there's the advantage of solar, that it can be built within urban areas, because then you don't need to expand the capacity of power grids as much as you'd need if you'd have to transmit all your electricity from remote locations, nuclear reactors, wind parks, and so on. So there needs to be a certain level of ingenuity in the development of these systems, and I've seen a need for a new type of role here of electrification strategists and electrification architects, people who are able to develop the structures of these systems in a way so that they become cost effective and user friendly.
Interesting. Another question that I have is for you, again, living in this world and constantly being immersed by it, is how do you feel about the coming about of this from a standpoint? What do you feel is a better way? Governments dictating hard stops, or markets getting to a point where the balance of the markets tells what's working, what's not, and when you know what I mean, like a gradual lean into it and sunsetting of old technology that proves to be outdated and not efficient and not best for the environment, things like that?
And that's a very good question, and I think both can be used, but if governments dictate a hard stop for a technology, they will also need to make some type of plan for the changeover process from the old technology to the new technology. It will be very problematic and chaotic if governments say we need to ban the sales of new petrol and diesel cars from 2035, and then it turns out that it can't be done. There will not be enough power. There will not be enough grid capacity. We can't install enough chargers in time to make it possible for all cars from that point to that are bought from that point and up until that point to be charged with electricity. And it's not much different from the situation where in 1961, when John F. Kennedy challenged the American nation to send a man to the moon and bring him safely back to Earth before the end of the decade. He then said, okay, before the end of the decade, we will send a man to the moon. We need to develop the technologies needed. And if he'd only left it at that, it wouldn't have succeeded. But he gave the NASA he challenged NASA with the task of achieving this, and he gave them the budget to do it. And that combination, building the resources and making NASA able to fulfill this challenge or take on this challenge, was necessary for the program to succeed in that short space of time. And in the same way, if governments want to ban the sales of new petrol and diesel cars from 2035, they will also need to at least coordinate and make sure that all the activities that will be necessary will be done.
Yeah, it's an interesting. I like the example you gave there of the sending a man to the moon. I can see a certain parallel, but if we played with that a little bit, imagine if John F. Kennedy would have said, on a scale that we're looking at here, in 15 years, we need to be able to send every person in the UK to the moon and back, right?
Yes.
That's what we're talking about from a scale, right? From a standpoint of like the Rome of current transportation economies wasn't built in a day. And from now, even now in 2023, or even back in 2021 or 22 to 35, that's a blink of an eye. If I look at my life 12 years ago, it feels like I went to bed and woke up 12 years later. That's how, in hindsight, how fast it gets when, that you start rolling down that hill faster as you get older. But, and all, kidding aside, 35 is going to come fast. And yes. For even a country the size of the UK, that's, again, landmass size, not that big. It's quite a few people for that island. But say someone like the US, or looking at a country like where Manny's from, India, to make a real, like, we want to make an impact, right? If it's going to make an impact, okay, from being a leader, it's always important to lead from the front. And the U.S. feels it needs to do that. And the UK is still a very influential country in the world, global scale. But the big countries are going to have to want to play ball, or we're just not going to even be a drop in the bucket of actual impact when it comes to doing this.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And where's that going to put us from a standpoint of economic advantage?
Yes, you really hit the nail on the head there, because the challenge that we are seeing ahead of us now to change transportation systems to electromobility is much bigger than the challenge of sending a man to the moon. So it's actually, as you said, it's a matter of turning eventually all 285 million cars in the United States, or all the 280 million cars in the EU, because the EU and the UK have made the same decision, basically to ban the sales of new fossil fuel cars from 2035. In the US, it's only California that have done that, as I understand it so far, and that decision has been made by air regulators and not by the government or by the governor. So it's but it's really a big challenge to try to make these huge systems competitive in terms of cost efficiency and develop user-friendly systems on such a large scale.
That's, and I think the other part of this, you and I were talking about this, getting ready to talk with you, Mats, is the way I put it is the juice worth the squeeze ultimately. Or are we just trading one sin for another, right? Meaning like, electric cars are cool. I've driven Teslas. There's a lot of them that I'd still like to drive. I think they're fast. Man, I have a big top speed, but man, they got some torque and they get you from 0 to eyeballs in the back of your head pretty fast. And they can be fun. They can be cool. They can look really cool. I love technology. I've got way too many screens in my house and in my pockets and everywhere else. But at the same time, are we just replacing one thing that works really well, not perfect, that's generally the way things work in the world, in the physical world we live in, is there's pluses and minuses to everything. And, electric mobility comes with both, because there's a upside and there's a downside. So in your opinion, Mats, is the juice worth the squeeze ultimately? Are we just going to morph and shift economies of scale and all these kind of things to be in a place where we're just going to be looking at, man, now we're running out of lithium. Now we're running out of these resources. Now we're paying people too little money to get us the all these kind of things that we're learning about that we don't even know about yet.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely. I don't have the answer to whether the juice is worth the squeeze, but it's there.
None of us do, but we have thoughts, right? What are your
exactly.
thoughts?
I think the only effect or the only consequence of this change will not be a more sustainable society. there will be a lot of consequences that lawmakers don't seem to have thought about, because banning the sales of new fossil fuel cars will actually mean that a lot of people will get unemployed. People who are now employed making engines for fossil fuel cars, people who are employed in suppliers for components and subsystems for those cars, and those are millions. It's like, and they are concentrated in particular areas like Detroit in the US and
there's a roll down effect, right? Think about how many, because once you get into electric cars, you see more and more automation in the driving and the transportation of things, and you got the shipping industry. Millions of people in the US, their livelihood is driving trucks, and you turn those to electric, and all of a sudden those are driving themselves, and all of a sudden you got people out of work. So it's a whole nother thing too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There are so many areas that get affected, and people. So far, I read a report today, or an article citing a report by the consulting company PricewaterhouseCoopers. That said that a lot of money will be saved by using electric cars by 2040, but there are so many other costs connected to this, like the unemployment we're talking about in the automotive industry and in the transportation industry, and the cost of changing all these things. So it's not very likely that we will see a cost saving short term, or that well, of course, a lot of jobs will be generated by the increase in electric cars and the need to expand power grids and charging infrastructure. We will need many more electricians than we have. I mean, there will be a tremendous shortage.
Manny, I'm sorry if I'm talking too much for you, but I completely agree with you. And if we go back to talking about governments creating hard stops to do this, what you do is you artificially impose a deadline onto something, and you don't get, and then you a lot of times we find with governments, when they do that, is like they do a really bad job of it. We're going to do this and we're going to provide this, and all of a sudden it's terrible. Everybody's waiting in line for some cheese, right? Like in this case, so my opinion, again, it's of little value ultimately, but my opinion is when you let markets properly regulated struggle through the hard work of getting to the right place, then you have a crossover. You have, that technology is getting better and more used, and then you have, as you're losing those jobs, you're creating more jobs, and then you have time to carry over and retrain and reposition. But when you, for instance, over here, what happened is, certain government parties and officials are going to cut coal production. Just turn it off. And then all of a sudden you have mass poverty in certain parts of the country. And then you have drug usage increase, and you have all these other things that are just killing people. And then you have no time to retrain a skill set that's been used to going in and working really hard in extracting coal, to sitting in front of a computer regulating a screen that's generating electricity, like whatever that looks like, or learning how to engineer things or maintain, or all those things. So when you don't allow that to happen,
yes,
you cause problems.
I think this change is of such a magnitude that it would be difficult to get, because this change means that some industries will go down the drain, basically. It's like we won't need oil, so the oil industry will not be needed to any big extent. And that's difficult. That type of situation is difficult to regulate, or to get to regulate through the market forces, because they will struggle against this type of change. And
do you think the oil industries will shift their production to other things, like more plastics, more other things, that because oil's everywhere?
They need to
we still have to burn
something.
it. Yeah.
But the problem is for them. Of course, the challenge will be for them to find big enough new markets and big enough opportunities to invest in, and so. But there's also this issue that the incumbent auto companies have delayed their entrance and their investments in electric cars, so that Tesla has taken a big a grip on the market, basically, because Tesla sells more than 1 million cars per year, and they're all fully electric, whereas General Motors, Ford, Volkswagen, and the others, they sell only a fraction of those, and they're divided between many more different models. So Tesla is profitable, but all the other auto companies seem to lose money on their electric cars, and it will be really difficult for the incumbents to take back those market shares, and it's going to be really difficult for them, because Volkswagen are complaining, for example, that the sales of their electric cars are not increasing rapidly enough. Ford projected a loss of $60,000 per electric car sold in 2023, early in the year. And Stellantis, the owner of Chrysler, Fiat, Peugeot, and Citroën, for example, they said that the old car market may collapse in 2035 if electric cars don't go down in price enough for the majority of buyers to be able to afford them. So there's a big challenge for the incumbents in this industry to take back the market shares they have lost and start to make money on their electric cars.
So yeah, basically, what you're saying is right now this EV market is only for luxury, people who can afford luxury. I mean, that's how I see it.
People of a certain mindset.
Yeah, mindset.
Right?
Mindset and luxury. It's a luxury product. Tesla is the luxury product. It's not for everyone. Everyday use, everyone cannot afford that.
Well, when I bought my truck last year, when my old truck it was time to get a new one, I was considering the Lightning. I thought the Tesla truck looked cool, but it wasn't ready yet. It's it's like now I think it's finally starting to ship or whatever. But I was like, okay, the Ford Lightning looks cool. It's got a neat features. I could run my house on it for a week if we ran out of power. All this cool stuff. But then the use cases started to come.
Yeah,
people in cold climates, like a big truck towing something, filling up the bed like you do. Like I have a truck. I have a big family. I'm constantly filling up the back of the like. That's what I need. And,
the
people were returning their trucks because they're just not, the tech isn't there yet.
Technology is there, but
it
has not been tested yet.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to, if you can rely on, in order to rely on a technology, it needs to be tested for, a couple of decades.
Well, think about the car industry that we have today.
Yeah.
In the late 1800s, early 1900s, horse and carriage. People that had cars or the horseless carriage, they were laughed at. They were kind of the butt of jokes. You're idiots. That's not going to stick. Well, it was literally like you were a joke if you had a horseless carriage, and it didn't happen overnight. It took time to catch on. It took time, and because people kind of think, well, the car was invented in 1914. No. It was decades and decades before that they kept pushing it, and they had electric vehicles back then, but the technology wasn't there yet. And so anyway,
absolutely,
the resources to support that technology was not there. I mean, right now, how many EV stations are there?
Well, look at electricity when everything was whale blubber.
Yeah,
it took time.
Yes.
Anyway,
I have a really I have a quite inexpensive electric car, but it's still 50% more expensive than a similar
what do you drive,
car.
Mats?
I drive a Renault Zoe. It's a small car.
What are its stats? What can it do for you? Distance and all that kind of stuff. And
in the summer, I can drive 200 miles on one charging, and it's a 5-seated car, but it's like
a hatchback or sedan?
Yes, it's a hatchback.
Hatchback, okay.
It's small, and there are now bigger electric cars as well, but
sure.
They're all significantly more expensive than.
I would have to drop $100,000 US to get a Ford Lightning. A relatively good equipped Lightning with a good enough battery, because I'm driving hundreds of miles sometimes a day or more. But that, yes. I mean, you're right. And that's one hurdle, price. And then I think the jury's still out on longevity. I think Teslas and stuff have been around 10 plus years now, long enough where people are starting to their batteries are going or they're trading in. I think we've seen some of it from the 90s and early 2000s with hybrids, like Toyotas and their hybrids replacing batteries. The
degradation of batteries is not as bad as people thought early in the development.
Does it kind of turn into cell phones or like DVD? Like you look at take your computers, your laptops. Every 3 years we're replacing them because they become obsolete. The software that runs them or the chips, the hardware that runs them become obsolete to run what's now. So at what point, if our transport, I was telling Manny this too. I was like, can you see somebody 40 years from now having a Tesla Model S from 2013 still on the road? No, the software's not going to run. The chips aren't going to be good. It's not like you can grab an old 65 Mustang here in the US and people will keep it running. You know what I mean?
Well, we should have a similar situation with electric cars as we have with gasoline cars, because we have like 1,500 semiconductors in any car at present, and there are a few more needed in an electric car because you have to run the electric motor and the battery and charging procedures and so on. But there are still about 1,500 chips in a gasoline car. So, and we don't experience that they would become obsolete in the way that we that computers do.
What if Renault said, Mats, we're no longer supporting your car. It's end of life, just like the emails we get from Microsoft or Apple. It's end of life. It won't run on this version anymore. And as of 12 p.m. January 6th, your vehicle's now end of life. We're turning off the servers that support the software that run your car.
Yeah, I think the difference between computers and cars is that for computers we're dependent on the storage capacity and the capacity of processors and so on, whereas in cars we don't have any of that. We can run a car. The software there is there to control the functionality of the car. And
if the network is down for Renault, will it still run? I'm just wondering.
I don't have the definite answer. I think there's a difference because there's not a need at all at any particular point to upgrade your car because your memory you run out of memory, or because you can't use you can't run Word or the Office suite on on an old computer. So I don't think there's a really analog situation to that in the car, and I don't think there will necessarily be a problem with upgrades and so on. But I'm not sure. I think probably
it's fascinating to me because the jury's still out, right? We don't know yet. And
no.
Like I've always, I think probably 6 or 7 years ago was the first time I drove an electric vehicle. It was Tesla Model S. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. It was neat. It's weird, no sound and all that stuff. But I still am not to the point where I trust it enough to where I want to change. I mean, I don't think the tech is there yet. I think it still takes too long to charge. I think it still doesn't go far enough, that kind of a thing. So
yes, I think the battery development will be the biggest change that may make an electric car obsolete. If you find, for example, batteries back in 10 years back had only 50% the or maybe
capacity,
30% the capacity that they have at present. It wasn't until Tesla entered the market that we got electric cars with say 200 miles range on the battery. So there may be capacity issues with batteries and so on, and the need to change batteries, and you have new technologies in the future, battery technologies or other technologies that may make you want to change your car or scrap the car. It's there's also the development of electric road systems. That's but that will be beneficial, I think, if those come online, because there is the idea that instead of stationary charging, we could perhaps use electric roads in the future where we can charge while driving. Those are tested.
That's a neat idea.
Yeah,
but you still have to be able to support the electrode, right?
Yeah,
that's what at the end of the day.
So they would have many advantages, but it will also be a huge investment to build them.
Matt, this is a cool topic that we've kind of transitioned to here. By the way, I'm having a lot of fun with this. This is really cool, and thank you. I'm really not trying to be devil's advocate or anything like that, but this is important stuff. So, what are your thoughts on, or how much have you learned about this hydrogen fuel cell for electricity generation within vehicles? Like it's something I know Toyota's working on, and probably a lot of other people. That's fascinating to me because hydrogen is easier to make, so it should be cheaper to provide and get a hold of. And anyway, so what are your thoughts?
It may be easier to make, but it's really electricity intensive to make, because if to drive 10 kilometers or 10 miles on using a battery-powered electric car, you need a certain amount of power. To drive the same distance using a hydrogen fuel cell car, you'd need twice as much or more than twice as much power to produce the hydrogen. So hydrogen it's abundant, it's everywhere, but you need to tear it out of chemical
you got to refine it, right? The same way we do with
so you need electrolysis to separate the oxygen from the hydrogen in water or in other liquids, and to do that you need a lot of electricity. So instead of doubling the electricity in order to fuel all American cars all American vehicles with electricity to use battery electric vehicles, you'd need to triple electricity production to use hydrogen. So that, and there is no infrastructure at all for the large scale distribution and the large scale production of hydrogen. So we'd have to build that from scratch. And I don't know how Toyota are thinking, or other companies are thinking about this, because that's really time consuming and investment intensive effort that would have to be done.
You know what? I wasn't paying attention 15 years ago or 18 years ago when you got into this, Matt, but I bet you it sounds a lot like what we were saying then. Yeah. Boy, that's just going to be too much, right? So, and I think it gets back to the fact that I think there's multiple technologies that we can leverage and the market can invest in. And it's like, make it a race, like who's going to win this race? And because the best technology that's the most efficient, that's the most cost effective, that should win, right?
It should, yes. It would be a very costly race because many technologies would be developed. A lot of money would be plowed into technologies that wouldn't make it in the end. And I think we would end up with a really difficult situation where we wouldn't have very well functioning transportation systems a bit into this development, and we would find that we had blown down huge amounts of money into technologies that were not that were not of any use in the end. So we could, in the way that NASA did for the Apollo program, they saw that they analyzed the different options, and they basically selected the technologies and the solutions that would have to be used. And because of the very short time frame, they had to select and they had to procure the development of those technologies and make sure that those technologies were developed to the point where they could make the trip to safely make the trip to the moon and back.
You know what? I remember watching a thing with Elon Musk a while back where he was talking about electricity and fuel and things like that. Obviously SpaceX, right? SpaceX ain't using electricity to get into space. The funny little thing about it is that 100 years ago, if we would have banned the use of fossil fuels and only limited to electricity, we'd never got to the moon.
Yeah.
Right. So is a little bit of okay. So I don't disagree with you at all, Mats. I think you're dead on. Like you don't want to throw a lot of money at a technology that's not going to work. But what if let's play out a little scenario. What happens if the US, the UK, let's say France and Germany, let's say they all decide by 2035, we're all going to get on board with it. It's going to make a coalition. It's going to be electric. Everybody who has a gas power car, we're going to give you a free electric. We're just going to make it work, right? We're just going to make you work, right? Make it work. The governments love to give away free stuff that's not free anyway. But you know what? China and India decides to say, you guys have fun, pound sand with that electricity. We're staying on fossil fuels, and we're gonna develop hydrogen based because Japan's gonna help us out, and they turn out to have the better, more cost effective way, and it just turns out to be better, right? Because there's a lot of things that are changing even with fossil fuels, that as technology comes on and they reuse the carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide to produce more. There's lots of things that are going on. But what happens if we invest all of our time, money, and energy into banning and we essentially create a technology that we put all our eggs in that basket, and it turns out to be not as good, and all of a sudden now we're behind?
Yes. We need to realize there are two different types of development. There are things that change and improve, and then there's physics and the laws of physics that don't. So, and you can, for example, improve the efficiency of petrol and diesel cars because they have energy efficiency of 25% or something like that. So there's a huge room for improvement, and you can get a lot more mileage out of a petrol and diesel car. Well, when you have but with an electric car, it's really different because we already have 95% or more than 90% efficiency of electric cars. So we can't improve that very much. So what if the amount of electricity that's needed today, we know that we'll need almost the same amount of electricity in the future as well, because that's a matter of physics. We can't get beyond 100%. So there are things that we can change, but there are also the laws of physics which we can't. And I'm not sure, but I think that there are laws of physics that we could use the laws of physics to investigate how efficient can a hydrogen car become, and how how much this twice as much electricity needed to produce the hydrogen.
Producing it. Yeah.
Can we get below? Can we improve that so that it becomes just 1.5 or 1.3? Could India succeed with that? Or is it something that's set down by the laws of physics? And we also know other things like the learning curve, that every time we double the number of units that have been produced of a product, the cost of making them tend to be reduced by a certain percentage. So, for example, in chip production, you may have a percentage of 30% every time you double the number of chips that have been produced. And that's a huge number, of course. In other areas, you may have 15, 20%. So you can forecast the improvements, and you can also have a ballpark feeling of the likelihood that
I think
India
the way that
or
the
someone
companies
else
are going to solve the expense problem, because when someone goes out and say, well, I don't want to pay 50% more for a vehicle that's basically the same size and whatever that I have now. I think the way that companies are going to do, they're going to start, a lot of companies are doing it already, I think. They're going to sell them at a loss, and it's going to be an as-a-service model, just like you see with electronics. So some of the biggest electronics manufacturers and companies, they sell their things at a loss, but once they have that in the household, in order to use it, or to use it to its best capacity, you get addicted to the service, then you're paying a monthly fee for the service. So the course of the lifetime of owning that piece of equipment, in this case a vehicle, to properly use this vehicle, it's going to be $100 a month service fee to get access to everything you need, to be able to remote start it from your phone, to be able to use this, that, and the other thing. And that's going to bring the margins up, because the money's in monthly recurring revenue, not in the one-time purchase.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. It's if you could create that, and if companies could sell the cars and then make a monthly revenue on services, that would be a tremendous business idea or business model for car makers. But so far that hasn't been the case, and I don't see that coming.
Well, I just got my wife a vehicle for Christmas, and in order to use the mobile app to start the car, to remotely lock the doors, to have any sort of geolocation services if it was stolen, all these kind of things through the GM OnStar service and everything that comes along with it, as well as using it as a mobile hotspot and all these really cool features, or even using the navigation features that are built in. You have to sign up for a subscription. That the minimum monthly cost for that all that is $40 a month. $40 a month. I don't pay anything right now outside of, I don't pay that much for any kind of minimal type of service. Now they're going to give me that for 3 months, totally free. And I'm going to get used to hauling our family around in this vehicle, having a Wi-Fi hotspot that their tablets and their phones are connected to. And it's going to get to a point where I can't live without it. And now they've got me for $40 a month. And then they can increase it, like Netflix started at $5 a month. Now it's like $15, right? And it's just going to gradually get to a point, and they're going to find the point where you bend, don't break. Once you break, okay, we're going to stay there, and we're going to keep pushing up against that. And now, I bought the vehicle 1 year used, so GM got no money from me on it, right? So they got that money from somebody else, but now they're going to be getting $40 a month from me for the use of, some tertiary. I could live without them, but I don't want to, right?
No,
so,
of course,
it's happening.
Yeah. I assume, it could happen, but I think still the opportunity for car makers to make money from software services is likely to be limited, and that the business models of the present will remain. Now that Tesla is also cutting the price on their cars to to keep other electric car companies out of the market or increase their market shares. Tesla. I think it's unlikely that this development will make a real change to the cost of owning a car.
Okay, I want to play through this a little bit because I want to bring in, because you know the India market really well. You've lived there your whole life. What's the automotive market like in India? And are you starting to see EVs over there more often? Do people really like them? Are they excited about them? Is the government or social agencies, are they concerned about the impact of what does it look like over there?
Okay, so when we talk about India, the consumer, they dictate the market. Okay, like in any other country,
free
but
democratic society,
okay. But the thing is, in order for EV cars to gain access, get a hold in the Indian market, the product needs to be cheap. It needs to have, more mileage. It needs to be reliable, and it needs to have an infrastructure in place. Like, okay, I know about in India. Here you talk about, this car has 200 miles or 400 miles. That doesn't work in India, especially where I live in Delhi.
Even and some of the roads aren't even paved that you drive.
Right? All the roads are there. Everything is there.
Okay.
But because of the traffic jams, even if the car has a 200 mile,
you might only get 5 miles.
5 miles, because, you're stuck in the traffic jam. It takes, over here, it takes 10 minutes to cover 20 miles. In India, it takes 40, 45 minutes to cover that 10 miles. So, the technology is not there right now. Okay, we are seeing more and more of, people are buying EV cars, but only those people are buying EV cars who have to travel, very less distance, maybe 10 miles in a day or 20 miles in a day. But if anyone is traveling more than, 20 miles, they are not going for EV cars. The prices of EV cars in India is comparatively, less than, or it's kind of, equivalent to a gasoline car. They have done a really good job. More and more companies are coming out with their EV products. We have EV two-wheelers. Most of the Indian consumers these days who are not using two-wheelers for their regular commute to office, they are buying EV two-wheelers. Every household nowadays, they will have at least one EV two-wheeler. But cars, no, we are not there yet, because okay, first of all, the infrastructure is not there. The cost, they have controlled the cost somehow, but to support the usage of an EV car, the infrastructure, the main thing is infrastructure is not there.
Yes. I think we're in a densely populated country like India, you'll have also bigger issues with charging infrastructure and the load on power grids.
Because the grid's got to be even different there, right?
Yeah,
right now, almost in the city that I live in, almost every gas station has a EV charging station.
But
it's there, but it takes more time, to charge your EV car. Then it takes time to just fill up your tank and leave the station.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the infrastructure, the technology is not at that point that if the whole of India, we just saw that there are
if everybody got a car and plugged it in tomorrow.
326 million cars are there. Just cars. I'm not talking about trucks. I'm not talking about buses. I'm not talking about two-wheelers. If all of them switch tomorrow, we don't have the infrastructure to support that.
I live in Sweden. It's not very densely populated, and we have there. I spoke to Volvo Trucks, and there are stretches of motorway here in Sweden where 3,000 vehicles pass every day. In Germany, and that will be a challenge because we expect here in Sweden that, of course, 3,000 trucks, there will be 15,000 or 20,000 cars on that stretch. And that means we will need football fields of chargers along that road, because not all cars or trucks will need to charge, but a certain number of them will. And in Germany, they have stretches of motorway where 30,000 trucks pass every day. And perhaps 100,000, and I assume it's the same in the US, that you have that type of amount, and to make the amount of electricity available on that type of road for all the cars that need to charge, or all the cars that would and trucks that would need to drive along that stretch if it had been electric road system. There would be a need for a tremendous amount of electricity, and I assume in India you'd need much more than that, because you have a lot more densely populated areas, and you also probably have less stable power systems.
I mean, everything is there. The power systems are more stable, when you compare it to 10 years ago. I mean, we used to have lots of, like power cuts and all that, but in the last, 5, 6, 7 years, or in the last decade, I have not seen power cuts like maybe once in 6 months. And that used to happen like almost every day, in 2000, from 2001 to 2010. But since 2010, the power cuts are not there. So yeah, and with the population and everything that we are talking about, that's tremendous. Okay.
Yeah, I don't even, that blows my mind. I've never lived in a place where that's happened. Like anytime where I've ever lived in the US, if you lose power, it's because something happened. Yeah. Somebody hit a telephone pole in your area and power went off for a while, we'll be back. Storm came, knocked out power. It's going to be back pretty soon. Blah, blah, blah. Hurricane, I've lived in Texas. That happens. But it's never been because we ran out or we overloaded it, or, you know what I mean? It's like, there just ain't enough. You need to turn off your TVs. You need to turn off your lights. You need to turn off your heat, your AC, because we're in bad shape.
Now, it's not just about, having the availability of power. It's also about, with EV vehicles, the time it takes to charge.
Oh, sure.
I don't have time to, sit in the gas station, to charge my car for 45 minutes.
Mats, what convinced you? I want to get into your head a little bit. I know we're going to run out of time, and maybe I'm just going to stop time. That's a new technology, because I got so much. Because I love the fact that you've put a lot of thought into this, Mats. What convinced you to buy that Renault EV?
Well, it was basically the range I got from a new Renault, and I also the fact that I need to drive an electric car to learn more about them, because I write about it and work with them.
Yeah, so it's like a dentist who doesn't take care of his mouth, or
yes.
A doctor who wants to tell you how to eat, but they're severely obese. You're like, the people that you deal with are going to call you and be like, I'm not listening to you. You're not even eating your own food, right? Yes. So that's huge. So what did you drive before you had an EV? Was this your first EV?
Yeah, well, I've had two of those. The model before I had for 5 years, and the present one I've had now for a year and a half. And before that I had, gasoline car, a diesel car. I still have a gasoline car to complement it, because I live in the countryside and I often drive big stuff, and I really need to drive a trailer and so on.
So and I love the candor. I love the honesty there. It's like, hey, I can't get completely off of this because there's what if scenarios, right? And the reason I kind of Socratic method there into this is because I think what a lot of people struggle with is, there's realities of infrastructure, but I think ultimately I was thinking about this while you guys were talking, I remember in like 2007 when the iPhone was announced, and cell phones had already come a long way, and a lot of people had started sort of cut the cord to phone companies in their house and things like that, but a lot of people were still on the fence, right? Like, because up to that point, cell phones were okay and they were getting better. You had a BlackBerry, but the little buttons and clickies and the screen, you could barely read it. But that technology, the iPhone, changed the game. It was so far beyond even what was there in capabilities, and it it bled over into other media. Like you could now play games like of high quality, and you could now do apps that it's silliest things. I remember a buddy I worked with got an iPhone, and he showed me, hey, I can make this look like a lighter, and when I move it around, the lighter moves, and if I blow into the speaker, the lighter goes, and I'm like, so cool, right? And within a couple months, I had an iPhone, right? It was useless, but like the technology got to a point where it was no longer a question of whether I would. It's like, when will I get this? Because I've got to have it. And I think a lot of people now, and if I look at internally at myself, it's like, man, it seems really cool, but I'm not there yet. You know, there has to be a tipping point or a shift, and like, this is so much better. And I think Teslas are cool, and I love some of the stuff, but it's still not so much of a game changer to what it does for me, because ultimately we're selfish people, and the way we live, we want to live a certain way because we've built a certain lifestyle. And other people in the world that don't have even what we have are trying to get there, and we're going to tell these people they can't even get there. Now they got to wait to try to get way up here. So I'm sorry I rambled a little bit, but I think that the tech itself, the hardware, the cars themselves have to get to a point where it's like they're so good at what they do beyond what we've already got, that's going to make the shift. Because I still think there's a lot of people that have convinced the impact of the world of carbon dioxide and monoxide is terrible, but there's the whole other point of it, like, hey, the world's gotten greener in the last few years. Yeah, it's gotten a little bit warmer, but it's better than getting colder, because more people die from cold than they do of warmth. So there's all this up and down and push and pull and stuff like that. But I think the tech's got to get so good that people are just willing to walk away from the old tech like we did. I don't have a corded phone in my house. Probably used to have 4, one in every room. You know? Now I literally have 3 cell phones. I'm trying to get rid of one, right? It's like, what the heck?
Yes, and with cars, I think for many people it comes back to the fact that you can go 70 miles an hour. You can get the air conditioning regardless of which car you have. And if you can get that 50% cheaper or 25% cheaper in a gasoline car, many people will choose that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think the Tesla trucks look cool. They're very futuristic, weird. I would be a weird person that would buy it. But if I get that sucker and I've got remorse because it's doing some cool stuff, but it's not doing the principal stuff I need it to do as good, if not better than what I had before, then I'm just going to put it back on the market and get what I had before.
I'm convinced we need to change. And I'm convinced the only alternative we have that's realistic is battery electric cars. But it's we need to find a way, and there's a need for a lot more research and development to go into the system aspects. How much infrastructure investment that will be needed, and how much and how we can improve the cost effectiveness of the electromobility systems, because I don't think they will be as efficient as they look today when we start to realize that we need to do a lot of investment.
Yeah, you know what? This conversation just came full circle. That's where you started, and we went all kinds of places in between, but we got back there. Hey, before we let you go, I want to learn a little bit about you, the person. What do you do in your personal life? What brings you joy? I know you work hard, and this is probably a passion of yours. But what do you like to do?
I like to watch stand-up comedy and sitcoms.
Okay, what's your favorite? Who's your favorite stand-up? Would it be someone we know, or is it somebody kind of local to where you are?
Chris Rock is good from the US.
Yeah.
We watch a lot of UK stand-up here in Sweden, and we get BBC stuff on streaming services. So we get like Michael McIntyre from the UK, and many more British ones.
I love British humor, especially like old 1980s British humor and stuff.
Alan Davis is a UK comedian. They have both talk shows and sitcoms and stand-up stuff with a bunch of different comedians.
So do you have a favorite sitcom?
Yes, it's called Black Books. It's a British one with a guy written by Dylan Moran and with well, his name is I forget his name, but there's a lady called Tamsin Greig also starring in it, and so on. Yeah, that's really out there.
Is that kind of super popular there? Is that one of the most popular ones by you guys? Or
no. It's
just to you.
It's a little obscure.
Flavor.
It's my favorite. Yes.
Cool.
I like.
What's popular where you are? What is everybody like watching and talking about? It might be complete garbage, right? You might, right?
Well, no one would know the Swedish ones. So I recorded a British podcast earlier today, and he said that there's a soap opera called Coronation Street, where if during the advertising breaks, the electricity use goes up because everyone puts on their tea kettles to heat their tea. So that Coronation Street seems to be still very popular in the UK, but it's well, I wouldn't.
I'm because what I'm going to do is you're going to tell us, and when we go live with this, I'm going to look them up, and so I'm always interested in, like, what I asked Manny the same thing. It's very weird here at our office in the US because we're connected to our offices in India. Like, anytime I go on YouTube or go search the internet, all the commercials come up are Indian. So I know the best candy bars, I know the best, pharmaceuticals. All the different commercials come up from India.
I'd say British comedy. There's Live at the Apollo. That's a stand-up comedy show. There's QI, which is a panel show with comedians. There's Would I Lie to You, which is also a type of comedy panel show. So a lot of the different things we get on BBC. The British channels.
One of the things my son got interested in recently, it was a couple months ago, we found out they had some episodes on Amazon Prime, was Mr. Bean. So I remember being in high school in the 90s, and our chemistry teacher would put on Mr. Bean after we got through all the lessons and everybody's just waiting around for the bell to ring. He'd put on Mr. Bean. So I'd seen it then, but he gets him so... just belly laugh rolling to see some of the, like, especially the part when Mr. Bean's in his car and that blue 3-wheel car comes like running around, and Mr. Bean does something and the car's upside down. Oh, it's just crazy. He loves it.
Yes, that's wonderful. Yeah. I really love British comedy. We have a lot of good Swedish comedy as well, but I wouldn't mention them to you because.
So do you go to live shows at all, or do you get out and see?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, very cool.
There are, we get all kinds of stand-up comedy here, and mostly Swedish ones, of course. But once in a while, we get visited by British comedians as well.
Yeah, my wife and I love to watch dry bar comedy. So it's the good comedians, but they kind of keep it clean. We've got 4 kids, and we don't want all the bad language and stuff like that, even though it still makes us laugh. But I love dry bar comedy, so you should check that out if you haven't looked at that. It's really neat. You can find them. But anyway, are you a sports guy? Do you like any kind of sports or anything?
Yes. I love a sport that you don't have so much in the U.S. Handball. I come from
I know about handball.
You do?
I do. So I used to work at a Boys and Girls Club, which is like a youth center kind of thing here, nonprofit. And they were associated with Nike back in the early 2000s. And they would send groups of kids to Nike camps, swoosh camps. They were swoosh clubs. And these Nike camps, they weren't about the big popular sports in the US. It was ultimate, which is with the ultimate frisbee, handball, rugby, water polo, those kind of things. So we'd go, and we got there was professional handballers there that were associated with Nike that taught us how to play as adults and as the kids. And it was fun. It was actually, it's like a cross between basketball and, football or soccer or whatever, right? But it's really cool. You can dribble it a couple times and you can take a couple steps and you just fire it. You got to be, it's pretty athletic and fast paced. It's cool.
I was born in a town where handball is really big. It's different in different towns and cities here. So handball is big in a number of places in southern Sweden. So, and it's big in Germany, France, and across Europe. So I think it's the World Championships that are going to be played starting next week.
Yeah, it's a pretty neat sport. I don't know where outside of the internet, and sometimes I forget it's even there. But I remember this was almost 20 years ago. I remember them sharing like handball was one of the second most popular sport in the world or something like that.
Really?
Yeah.
Well,
that's great.
Sounds
so many countries
weird, really weird. Yeah. It's a good sport. It's really fast.
Yeah, cool. Manny's a cricket guy. Do you know anything about cricket?
Wonderful. Yes.
Oh yeah. I mean,
do you follow cricket?
Not much.
It's a British thing.
It's a British thing.
Yeah, it's a British thing and British Empire thing.
Yeah. Spreading it to the world. Hey, Mats, you've given us a lot of time, and I don't want to take too much, but this has been wonderful. I appreciate all the information you've shared. Obviously not going to matter if I say this or not, but carry on, my friend. Keep going. Keep learning. Keep fighting for what you believe to be a good way and a good course of action moving forward. Because I have a feeling we'll get there someday, whether it's the way we think it is right now or it's not. But we need people like you doing what you're doing. So we really appreciate you joining us on the business line. Manny, anything from you?
No, that's good. I mean,
good. Okay,
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.